And what if I told you that Madeleine McCann's kidnapper made a mistake that went unnoticed for years? A crucial detail might reveal the truth about that night. But did the police ignore this clue? Today, let's analyze that flaw and what it could mean for the case. That night, everything seemed to follow a rehearsed pattern. Dinner, visits to the children's room, the apparent calm. But at some point between a glass of wine and a carefree conversation, something went terribly wrong. Madeleine McCann disappeared without a trace. What happened that night has been analyzed countless times. Theories were created and discarded. Leads were followed and then abandoned. But there is one detail, a mistake made by the kidnapper, that remained hidden all this time. Now imagine that this flaw was always there, waiting to be noticed. What if a single forgotten piece in this puzzle could reopen the case? Over the years, the investigation faced obstacles, changes in direction, and contradictions. There were moments when everything seemed about to be resolved, but then silence once again took over the story. However, something changed. A new look at the crime scene brought to light an inconsistency that had gone unnoticed for years. What if this discovery is the missing key to finally unravel what really happened to Madeleine McCann? For a long time, the narrative surrounding Madeleine's disappearance followed a pattern. A child goes missing, the police take action, searches are conducted, and suspects are interrogated. But what if the most important mistake isn't in the investigation, but in the crime itself? By analyzing similar cases, experts discovered a pattern. Kidnappers almost always make a mistake, a slip, a lapse that gives them away. Sometimes it's something simple, like a footprint in the wrong place, or a witness who saw something but didn't understand what it was at the time. And in Madeleine's case, there was such a mistake, something that doesn't fit with the logic of the perfect crime. The most surprising part? This mistake was not made by the police. It wasn't due to negligence on the part of the investigators or the journalists following the case. It was a mistake by the kidnapper himself. And we're not talking about an insignificant detail. We're talking about something that, if noticed earlier, could have completely changed the course of the investigation. But how could something so important have been ignored for so long? The answer to that question could be as impactful as the crime itself. The Madeleine McCann case became one of the most publicized missing person cases in history, but that doesn't mean it was resolved in the right way. The Portuguese and British police followed several lines of investigation, some completely opposed to each other. What should have been an unyielding search for answers soon turned into a game of misinformation, where conflicting theories dominated the news. But amid all this, there was a mistake, a flaw so evident that it seems impossible to believe no one noticed it before. Now, a new analysis of the case reveals that this flaw might be the key piece to understanding what really happened that night. Yet this raises an even more unsettling question. If this mistake was there all along, why did no one use it to advance the investigation? Could it be that the confusion surrounding the case caused this clue to be overlooked? Or is there a deeper reason why it was never taken seriously? What is about to be revealed may change everything you've heard about the Madeleine McCann case. And the most shocking part? The kidnapper's mistake might be easier to understand than we imagine. But is there still time for this revelation to bring answers? Now let's analyze this flaw in detail and discover what it really means for the future of this case. That night started like any other for the group of friends at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz. They had dinner at the tapas bar restaurant, talked, laughed, and took turns checking on the children. It was a system that seemed secure until it wasn't. Around 10 p.m., Kate McCann returned to the apartment to check on the children. She entered the room and sensed something was off. The silence felt wrong. That's when she noticed the window was open, the curtains swaying in the night breeze. The twins' crib was intact, but Madeleine's bed was empty. "Madeleine is gone!" she cried in panic. The words cut through the night's calm like lightning. The first few minutes were chaos. Guests and staff began searching for the girl. They called the police, but the authorities took too long to respond. When they finally arrived, they made mistakes that would compromise the entire investigation. The crime scene was not isolated. People came in and out of the apartment, contaminating possible evidence. There was no clear search protocol, and contradictory information. Chances of finding Madeleine diminished. But in the midst of this despair, there was one detail, a mistake, that no one noticed that night. The kidnapper, whoever he was, had not planned everything as perfectly as it seemed. A slip had occurred, and this mistake might be the missing piece to understanding what happened that night. The police believed that Madeleine was taken by someone who knew the area well, but there was a problem with this theory. Initial reports indicated that the window of Madeleine's room was open. For many, this meant the kidnapper must have entered and exited through there. But there is a strange detail. Investigators analyzed the window and found no fingerprints on the outside. If someone had used that route, it would be impossible not to leave traces. Another inconsistency emerged. Madeleine's parents claimed that the door to her room was ajar when they left for dinner. However, when Kate returned, the door was wide open. If someone had entered through the window, why would they need to open the door? Then came another detail that few noticed. A witness stated seeing a man carrying a child wearing pajamas similar to Madeleine's. But the direction he was heading made no sense. The kidnapper took a route that was not the quickest way out of the resort. Why? Did he get lost? Or did something cause him to change direction at the last moment? This change of route might be the key to understanding what really happened that night. But if this mistake was so obvious, why was it never thoroughly explored? What could have been discovered back then? And why was this clue ignored? The kidnapper's mistake was there from the start, but it went unnoticed. Now, with a new analysis, this detail might be the missing piece. The police always believed that Madeleine was taken quickly, without anyone noticing. But if that were true, why did a witness see a man carrying a child in a white pajama, hurrying in an unusual direction? That witness's account could have been crucial. But what few know is that it was only taken seriously much later. Initially, investigators dismissed the description of the man, believing he was merely a tourist returning to his room with his own child. The problem is that the man's position made no sense. If he were returning to the resort, why would he be walking? If the kidnapper had a perfect plan, why would he need to expose himself by carrying a child in plain sight? That indicates something went wrong. Something unexpected forced him to change his course. Could he have been caught off guard in the middle of the act? Did someone see something they shouldn't have? This twist changes everything. The kidnapper's mistake may have been exactly that change in route. He didn't follow the initial plan and had to improvise. And when criminals improvise, they leave traces. But if this information is so important, why was it ignored? This detail might mean that Madeleine McCann wasn't taken to where people always imagined. The investigation focused on one side, but the kidnapper's mistake suggests that the truth could lie elsewhere. When we analyze the behavior of criminals who kidnap children, we see a pattern. They choose safe routes, avoid exposure, and have a planned escape. But this man, when seen, was doing exactly the opposite. If he were confident that no one would notice him, why take such a visible route? The most accepted theory is that something forced him to act in a hurry. Perhaps he realized someone was returning to the room earlier than expected, or maybe a noise, an unexpected movement, made him rush and change his plan. And that change might have been the mistake that left clues about his whereabouts. What's even more striking is that this account was forgotten for years. When it was finally considered, it was too late to follow the traces that might have led to Madeleine. If investigators had analyzed this change of route from the beginning, could the case have been solved? Now, with this new perspective, what can be done to reevaluate this clue? Is there still time to discover what really happened that night? This might be the last chance to understand the mistake that could change everything. The mistake of Madeleine McCann's kidnapper was always there, hidden in plain sight. For years, the police, the media, and independent investigators scrutinized every detail of the case, reviewed timelines, checked testimonies, but no one noticed this slip-up. Now, with a new analysis of that night's events, an unexpected detail has come to light, a mistake that might reopen the case once and for all. To understand this, we need to go back to that night of May 3rd, 2007. Around 10 p.m., Kate McCann returned to the apartment and noticed that Madeleine was missing. Desperation set in. The police were called, and in the following hours, the crime scene was completely compromised. But there is one detail that was always overlooked: the route the kidnapper took when leaving the resort. The most logical course of action would have been to take a discreet route, avoiding being seen at all costs. But that's not what happened. Witnesses reported seeing a man carrying a child along a path that didn't make sense for a well-planned escape. This raises a crucial question. Did the kidnapper have to change his plan at the last moment? If this theory is correct, it means that something unexpected happened inside that apartment. Something forced him to act impulsively. A sudden movement, a sound that shouldn't have been there, a mistake that nearly exposed him. When we analyze similar cases, we see that criminals who are interrupted in the act tend to make mistakes. Small errors that, when correctly analyzed, can be the key to solving a crime. And there is one specific detail in this story that was never taken seriously: time. The window between the parents' last check and the moment Kate McCann raised the alarm was very short. If the kidnapper managed to enter and exit without leaving traces, how was he seen? The answer may lie in the fact that he wasn't alone. Many theories suggest that a second person was involved, someone who facilitated the kidnapping. And what if, in the midst of the plan, something went wrong? If a light unexpectedly turned on, if a door closed more forcefully than it should have, if Madeleine cried or resisted, if this miscalculation truly happened, it may have left a trail that was never properly investigated. But then comes the most important question. If this information was available from the start, why was it never explored further? The Madeleine McCann case has always been surrounded by interests, conflicts, and mistakes. From the beginning, media pressure and errors by the authorities created a scenario where clues were ignored and suspicions were diverted. The British and Portuguese police followed different paths, creating an impasse in the investigation. Contradictory reports and poor decisions prevented a clear line of inquiry, and this kidnapper's mistake, which could have been a game changer, ended up lost in the chaos. Now, looking back, it's clear that this clue can change the course of the case. It's understanding why this mistake happened and what it truly means. But the most shocking part is that this flaw might have been deliberately set aside. From the start, there was enormous concern about controlling the narrative of the case. A lot was said, but not everything was thoroughly investigated. Some theories were quickly dismissed, while others, with less evidence, gained traction in the media. If this mistake was noticed at the time, why didn't it become the focus of the investigation? Could it be that someone had an interest in keeping this piece of the puzzle hidden? Clues like this have helped solve crimes years after they occurred. Small details that, at first, didn't seem important, but that, with new technology and more precise analyses, revealed shocking truths. Now, with forensic advances and artificial intelligence being used to review archived cases, there is a real chance to re-examine this mistake from a new perspective. The big question is there still time to correct this flaw? The Madeleine McCann case became one of the most sensational criminal mysteries in history. And in cases like this, every piece needs to be handled with utmost precision. If there's one thing we've learned from unsolved crimes, it's that the truth always leaves traces. If this clue is reevaluated properly, could we finally get the answers the world has been waiting for more than 17 years? Or will this mistake continue to be ignored, bearing any hope of discovering what really happened that night? If this kidnapper's error was always there, why did no one connect the dots before? Perhaps because, in the chaos of that night, the urgency to find Madeleine caused important details to be overlooked. But now, with this new analysis, it's impossible not to wonder, are we finally facing the key to understanding what really happened? Over the years, this case has become a labyrinth of doubts, failures, and conflicting theories. Every new clue seemed promising, but in the end, everything returned to square one. Yet history shows us that crimes have been solved based on mistakes that initially seemed insignificant. Time may have passed, but can the truth still be discovered? Looking back, it's clear that the investigation failed at many crucial moments. From the compromised crime scene to the witnesses who weren't heard at the right time, there were a series of missed opportunities. But now this specific mistake might be what's needed to connect the dots. If this clue had been taken seriously earlier, perhaps we'd be closer to the answers we've been seeking for so long. The most unsettling thought is that if this flaw is really so important, why was it never deeply analyzed? Was it just another mistake by the police? Or was there something bigger at play? How many cases remain unsolved because essential information was ignored? The truth may be closer than we think, but the big question is there really an interest in finding it? If there's one thing this case has taught us, it's that nothing is simple. With so many versions, so many possibilities, and years of speculation, the truth always seems one step ahead. But throughout history, we've seen crimes solved decades later simply because someone decided to look at a detail that had been ignored before. Perhaps we're facing that moment now. And what about you? Do you believe that this mistake could change the course of the investigation? Or will it just be another detail lost in time? I want to know your opinion, so comment below, is there still time? To let me know you stayed with me until the end. And if you want to keep diving into this mystery, don't go anywhere yet. In the next video, we'll analyze another ignored clue that might bring even more answers about what happened to Madeleine. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. See you there.